Hey guys, good evening. Welcome to Two Line Slot Cars. Hope you're having a great week. Got an exciting live stream tonight, and looks like we've got quite a bit going on in the chat. Hey Massimo. Oops, hang on. Let me kill some audio here. Let's see. I must have a window open. There we go. All right, I'm back. So yeah, exciting times tonight. I don't know what you guys are into. Appreciate you for jumping on last night's live stream with Raul and George and Dave Kennedy and Warren, and that was a lot of fun. But tonight, guys, I'm not going to delay. I will talk about Roast Coffee. They're back to roasting coffee, and we will be giving some coffee away tonight to send out to somebody. Just a big thanks to Rost. It's been kind of a couple crazy weeks for them, yet they still continue to be a great sponsor and are doing some amazing things in the community. Had a story tonight that Trent has jumped in and helped another coffee shop that's opening up in town that is struggling to get open, and so he's providing use of his kitchen and roasting beans for them, and just the collaboration from my buddy Trent. I really appreciate it. So if you guys are interested in some coffee, don't forget, use the code 2lines, all one word, and you'll get 20% off your first subscription for the life of the subscription, or 25% off your first purchase. So guys, thanks for helping him out. I really appreciate that. So I'm excited. We've talked a lot about Oh, wait, I lost my camera. We've talked a lot about Carrera digital and analog and magnets and no magnets, and a lot of talk in the chat about that and on the live streams. And one of the things that I keep finding is the community of slot cars is pretty amazing. And I don't know, maybe, 6 or 8 months ago, Jim Cunningham reached out to me and sent me this wonderful email and just complimented me on my content and the videos, and answered a lot of questions that I was asking in the live stream. And it just started this great conversation back and forth. And Jim is with us tonight, so I'm going to bring you on, Jim. And welcome.
Hey there.
Welcome. Let me get rid of the roast. You guys know the address by now. But yeah, welcome, Jim. I'm excited that you're on the show. If this is a show, the live stream tonight, and I'm sure the guys will probably have lots of questions as we jump into your story, but I think that's where we want to start tonight. You've been in slot cars for a long time. We've talked a lot about that. You've amassed quite a large collection of slot cars, and you've built a lot of slot cars, but I think we just want to go back to the beginning. How did you get involved in slot cars early on, and where has that journey taken you?
Okay, well, thanks, Marty, for having me on as a guest on Two Lines. I've been enjoying watching the show, and so I like to describe my personal history with slot cars as racing from the space age to the future. Okay, at the age of 7 in 1963, my hero was Wally Schirra, the astronaut who flew the Mercury 7 capsules and later the Gemini and Apollo. And in the 1960s, auto racing had entered a golden age of popularity and innovation. Dad was an auto mechanic and race car fabricator, and the family often traveled and sometimes camped at racetracks. Mom and I began building model cars on the kitchen table. Dad built a large bookcase with a panel that folded out as a table for train layout. And building out the train layout was a great family project. Every figure had a story. Every figure and house, we had all these stories made up for what was happening out there on the layout. But my first slot car set arrived under the Christmas tree in 1963. I still have that first slot car.
Oh wow!
I'm one of those weird kids that takes care of my toys.
Yeah.
Before long, the train layout was replaced by a scenic slot car track that I designed and built. Inspiration and instruction came from magazines at the newsstands on the way home from school. The school library also had books about slot cars and other related projects. Now I have these in my own library. Of course, I also read about the big commercial raceways running the 124 scale cars that were popping up like dandelions. Nearby in Closter, New Jersey, there was a raceway that had all 9 of the American Model Raceways tracks: the original Blue King, the Aristocrat Hill Climb, the Monarch, the Royal, all 8 of them.
Wow.
All 9 layouts, but all of them were 8 lanes wide, of course. So that meant 72 people could race at one time, and sometimes I waited an hour for a turn. So anyway, I pressured my dad to take me to the race center. I had my favorites all picked out and circled in the magazines and mail order catalogs. But about that time, my dad was injured at work, and my family was struggling financially. So I'm sure buying a slot car that cost $12.95 then, which is like $124 in today's money, was difficult. So he did agree to take me to the raceway to watch and rent. And we did that. And not long after that, Dad presented me with a kit to build. One of the cars on my list was a Cox BRM. But as he did, he told me, "I won't buy you another one until you win with this."
Uh-huh.
So I did. I also learned that if I won the Wednesday night race 3 weeks running, that on the 4th Wednesday, few people wanted to race with me. So with the promise of a new car for winning and wanting challenging, well-attended races, I tried every form of slot cars. I moved through dozens of different tracks, classes, and leagues. I basically raced every style from HO to open wing cars and everything in between. When I was 12, in 1968, I was given a box full of old slot cars. They were old in 68. And those were from the days when they were almost entirely hand-built with improvised parts. And soon I was rebuilding and restoring them. My dad couldn't keep buying me cars, so right. He gave me this box of old stuff, hand-me-downs. And so I'd take those to the track after rebuilding them and testing and tuning them. But nothing was more satisfying than beating the rich kid with all the latest equipment with a car that he laughed at when I walked in.
Right.
So that really got me into restoring and tuning and appreciating the hand-built stuff.
Right.
And rather than racing my cars until they were junk, I would set aside each winter and move on, sticking to my policy of win and move on. So that led to my collection, which is currently over, 1,500 cars, depending on how you count it, if you count the ones that are still projects. I did not hold my dad to his promise to buy a car for every win, so I let him off the hook. But more importantly, I guess, building, tuning, and repairing, and eventually designing or restoring slot cars built skills that led to a career. Driving a production slot car is fun and can build motor skills and a visceral understanding of the physics involved in traction, acceleration, and cornering. But building slot car tracks, you learn building slot cars and tracks. You build plastic and metal fabrication, electric motor and control systems, material selection, painting, graphic design, and applications. If you're building for scale accuracy or restoration, you learn a lot about the rich history of motorsports and of slot racing itself.
Yeah.
And then as a track owner, you're a promoter, a rules judge. You have to manage social interactions of children and competitive adults. So there's a lot of depth to the hobby, as you know.
Right.
And I got to experience all of that. Another thing about slot cars that I appreciate is that they're particularly suited for the application of the scientific method. Once your driving skills have been honed and the precise timing systems on our tracks, they're accurate to the thousandth of a second. and the controlled environment of a slot car track provide a real laboratory for experimentation in the pursuit of speed and stability. I have a little story about that. In the summer of 1973, before my senior year of high school, I was given access to the wind tunnel facility at Stevens Institute of Technology. Aerodynamics was becoming an important factor in racing the faster cars. I did a study of the drag and downforce properties of dozens of different body shapes. I basically solicited bodies from all the manufacturers and tested all of them for drag and downforce. I went to a raceway. To correlate my lab results with on-track times to see if what I was seeing in the wind tunnel actually correlated to lap times. So as I was working, 3 men came in and started asking me questions about how to build the fastest possible car. They just discovered slot car tracks, so I gave them basic advice and showed examples, and they were quite interested in the chassis, bodies, and controllers, but they were curiously disinterested in motors. They went to the parts counter and left. I figured, the shop owner will give them an appropriate motor. Well, the next day, they were back with cars that they had built. They drove one of their cars around the Novolare. This was at Elmsford Raceway in New York. And the Novolare was a 240-foot high-speed track, one that really lets the motors sing. And we were running Group 7 open cars on it, principally, the precursors of wing cars.
Yeah.
Anyway, so they drove their car, and the timing monitors on the walls, showed flat lap times. Good lap times on that track at that time were about 4.5 seconds. That's on a 240-foot track.
Wow. That's flying.
These were, pro-level cars.
Sure.
Anyway, so the men looked proud of their work and called across the room, said, "Hey, how's that?" And I sensed that they expected me to be impressed, but I could see 9 seconds on the timing screen, and I didn't know how to be polite, so I was struggling for a polite response, So I took a car over there to the track thinking I could help them. They were still driving their car around. They kind of ignored me. So I put my car on the track and I knocked off a couple of 4.5 second laps, lapped their car twice per lap. And they were dumbfounded. They were shocked. Their car was essentially the same as mine, except for the motor. Well, it turns out the men were electrical engineers, specialists in motor design. They were working on a project to produce very high performance motors for aileron control on cruise missiles to be produced by General Dynamics. They thought their latest design would be just awesome at a slot car, far superior. Now they were really interested in my motor.
Sure.
They look at the motor, and of course, the open motors like that, you can see, the armature and so forth. So the lead engineer looked at my motor, and he looked up, and he was so astonished, he must have forgotten what he had just witnessed, because he said, "The wire used on this armature is far too large a gauge for a motor this size. It must be less than 6 inches long. You can't do that. That's a dead short." Right? So, and then one of the other guys suggested that they buy some of these motors to study in the lab. The other guy said that was concerned that a commercially available motor that exceeded their target specifications would end their contract. So, and I could just imagine what their boss would have said if he had found out that their work had fallen far short of what a toy car motor from the local hobby shop could do. So
they bought in a slot car.
Yeah. So they brought in test equipment to the track, tachometers, Gauss meters, oscilloscopes, thermal imaging cameras, voltmeter, all kinds of stuff. And it was kind of fun listening to them chatter as they reverse engineered a toy car motor to replace those developed in a state-of-the-art defense contract-funded lab. It's a clear example of how competition outpaces textbook engineering.
Right.
So
perfect example.
Yeah. Slot car racers have led motor development at Tesla, race car development in Formula One, control systems at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory. I've met some of these people. Many world championship drivers have raced slot cars as kids. Many continue to do so today. So in my case, I created a company, named it CycleArt, and applied my slot car skills to finishing and graphic design for high-end racing bicycles and restoration of vintage bicycles. I'm still very much into restoring things. My crew and I delivered over 12,000 projects like that over 40 years from our San Diego shop.
Wow.
And our customers ranged from enthusiasts to nostalgics to top pro riders to museums to collectors, artists, custom bicycle builders, and even some of the largest bicycle manufacturers. We did a lot of prototype work. So many of our techniques and skills came directly out of slot cars. As the bicycle company matured, I started a slot car club and developed a hybrid of club and commercial formats that I'd experienced. I'd raced in probably 50 different raceways and with about 50 different clubs. And I realized that the traditional slot car track was probably not a good business format given how many had closed. So I wrote a business plan in 2002 and shared it with some of the club members, and several of them wanted to partner in the slot car business that I had outlined. It gradually grew in the space I shared with CycleArt. By 2012, we had a comprehensive web store, a retail event space with 4 large tracks for club racing, parties, and social events. We had portable tracks we took to many large public events all over Southern California. And we now provide entertainment at private parties, fundraisers, company parties, and an attraction at trade shows. I brought portable events all over, portable tracks to events all over the U.S. and as far away as Dubai, Barcelona, Copenhagen, and Budapest. When I sold CycleArt, I was trying to sell the bicycle business after 40 years to focus on the slot car business. I really didn't want to be trying to run both of them. So I sold CycleArt, but I was contracted to move to Little Rock for 18 months to reestablish it. My business partner couldn't manage all of the Nomad Raceways operations by himself, so we streamlined it, cutting the web and retail locations to focus on the mobile events. I considered opening a retail location in Little Rock where there's plenty of vacant commercial space and few indoor family-friendly recreational opportunities.
Yeah.
I was surprised to find retail space cost to be similar to San Diego in a market less than 1/10 the size. So I shelved that idea.
Yeah.
I did, however, bring part of my bicycle collection, my slot cars, and several of my favorite portable tracks. Initially, we rented the largest apartment in Little Rock. It was an 1840s home in downtown Little Rock. In the 1860s, it belonged to the owner of all the river boats on the Arkansas and world's largest cotton plantations. We put a slot car track in front of the fireplace where Mark Clemens, Samuel Clemens, Mark Twain, and Jeff Davis once sat. And
that's
when
wild.
we completed our obligation to the buyers of CycleArt in 2016, we planned to move to stronger markets for the slot car business. We had deposits for events all over the country, and we were set for our strongest year with the portable tracks. Then they all canceled due to COVID.
Right.
With travel and gathering indoors events on indefinite hold, we hunkered down in Arkansas. Susan got a great job with the Department of Transportation and was able to work from home. She's still able to work from home. And I developed an online slot car store and an eBay store selling mostly vintage slot car parts. And we developed the OmniSlot Box. We were able to buy a home in Sherwood large enough to house all the toys. my inventory and hold slot car club racing events. Um, so that's pretty much where we're at. I travel broadly, I'm starting to travel again doing slot car events. Wherever I go, I also make time to seek out local clubs and raceways. Um, People think I'm nuts because I'll spend 8 hours running race after race after race at a event, and then I take a break and I go find a slot car raceway and go there for the rest of the evening.
Right.
And so, that's me. But why? You have to ask sometimes, and I think it's because slot racing creates community, camaraderie. Its practice builds focus and dexterity. Driving on the edge of control in the midst of other racers builds not just skill but self-control.
Yeah.
Testing modifications to slot cars to improve their performance requires the use of the scientific method, which teaches core engineering concepts and maybe fabrication skills. Slot car racing is accessible to handicapped persons with mobility or mental challenges like autism. I've seen it bring 3 generations together with a shared passion. Psychology and neuroscience tell us that recreational activities like slot car racing improve mental health and increase mindfulness and happiness. It can be a platform for creative and artistic creations. When I began slot car racing during the peak of its popularity, most slot cars were built from kits. Now, like most hobbies, the bulk of the market has moved to ready to run. And while this has vastly improved the access to high quality equipment at low cost, remember the slot cars I want were $140, and that was for a basic model.
Yeah.
This move away from assembly or fabrication skills generally, I think, has eroded our nation's manufacturing capacity and weakened our appreciation and understanding of craftsmanship. Slot cars can be a part of the makers and STEM initiatives that are finally working against that trend.
Right.
Internet and social media have expanded the slot car community and given instant access to a vast library of slot car content. But this future of addiction to screens and violent games and endless marketing and social bullying is not the one we expected to flower from the space age. Slot car racing can serve as an antidote for internet addiction with in-person social events, making actual things and competing in nonviolent and objective activities. So, and it's fun.
Right.
So
yeah,
that's it.
It encompasses a lot of things. And I mean, I think the beauty of your journey and story, just how it basically created your career because of a hobby. And it's, that old adage that people say, you don't work a day of your life if you love your job. I'm sure I butchered that and said it wrong, but that's okay. Everybody gets
we get the idea.
Yeah, you get the idea. But if you love what you do, it's not work. And so many people get trapped in a job that they hate and they're miserable. And thank goodness there are hobbies like slot cars out there, because the mental health aspect of that is entirely true. I mean, I think about why the hobby is seeing this resurgence is because we were all trapped in the house for months, and we were looking for things to do, and all these the old slot car tracks started coming back out and getting set up on the living room floor, and the number of conversations I have every week with guys that have jumped on my channel and send me comments and send me messages. So many of them have said, Marty, I jumped back in the same time you did for the same reason. I was looking for something new to do, and I was tired of being at home. And if I'm going to be stuck at home, it might as well be something fun. And I think we take advantage of that. But all the other things that you said, it is really, it's like competition can be healthy. And it can drive, innovation and, some guys out there that are so competitive that they cheat are pretty clever. The things that they come up with, and it's
Yeah.
because that drive to win. But I think that we've seen some amazing things. Just watching some of the interactions that we've had back and forth via email. Some of the cars you've sent me, these beautiful cars, and I would have thought that they were, built in the last couple of years. And you were saying that some of those are things that you built back when you first started, and they're beautiful works of art. The chassis are beautiful, and the way they work are super innovative. And so it's fun. Thanks for sharing your story. It's there were lots of comments in the comment section that people are enjoying, like listening and hearing the stories, because that's one of the things that storytelling is. It's changed over the years. I wouldn't say it's a lost art, but I think that people tell stories in a different way now. YouTube has created this space that people can be creative, but just sitting down and having a conversation and hearing somebody's story is still the best way to hear a story for me. And so thanks for sharing that. So it looks like you've got a lot of stuff on the wall behind you, Jim.
Yeah, that's some of it. That's a little bit. It's kind of everywhere. If I can flip this camera around, why don't we take a little tour?
Yeah, and I will give you the full screen too, so the guys don't see my ugly face.
All right, so I think I'll do it this way.
Yeah, we'll just follow you around.
And if I got that right, yeah, there we go. All right, so now we can see where we are. I've got a little bit of an inventory here just for the club guys when they come in. Some Scalextric, Carrera, NSR, Slotted, some RevoSlot. But let's start with the first one. So there's my first slot car, that little HO Corvette. That's one of those vibrator motor Aurora model motoring cars. So there's a case of some of my HO stuff. There's some die-cast in there too. There's a little bit of Hot Wheels. Same with the case below it. There's some die-cast, and those are Ortorero slot cars. And one of my favorite cars right there in a die-cast. So that's the case. And these are Formula One cars. Got the vintage Formula One, later stuff, some NASCARs. These are mostly production 132 cars. Not too much handmade stuff there.
Yeah.
A few vintage things up on top. But the library, I'm big on libraries still.
Sure.
Most of this, well, not all of it, but most of that is slot car related. I've got complete runs of many of the magazines. And like I mentioned on the newsstand, these are the kinds of things that I picked up then. And I continue to buy books. We've got Philippe Gillespinet's book and all of Carlo Tonelezzi's books. There's Eddie Shore's. I've raced with these guys. This one I just picked up, Chris Pointer's Slot Cars and Architecture. Man, he talk about scientific method. He gets into it that way.
Yeah.
This is a rare and very interesting book, A History of Electric Model Roads and Racetracks. I often get the question of, well, when were the first slot cars? And I do like to point to this book and the 1908 date. It does show some of the earliest stuff there. Ray Gardner, another old slot car racer, wrote a little book about 50 years of fun, and now I realize I could do that too if I really wanted to. This book amazed me. This is a book by, you go through it, and it's written in the 60s, and it gives all kinds of, great documentation about how to scratch build cars, all kinds of different, configurations, bodies that are available. There's a KMB, there's a classic. Anyway, one of the things that strikes me about it, even though it includes an honest overview of all the different products, all these different controllers, for example, all by different companies, and yet, surprisingly enough, the company that produced and printed the book was the Aurora Plastics Corporation. Okay, they had their own stuff to sell, and yet they actually produced an honest overview of the entire industry. Good on them.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I don't know that any corporation does that anymore. This one, an old book. It's rejected from a library, probably 40 years ago. But this one is fun for me because it's a story of a kid that goes slot car racing. His dad raced drag cars. That's very similar to the car that my dad ran, and altered.
Oh wow.
Karting, commercial tracks. This definitely could have been me. That's exactly what the race centers looked like then. So that's a fun book. Rail racing, the predecessor to slot cars. So yeah, I do like the library, but
that's all recommended reading, right? For slot car
people. Catch up with me, for next edition. This is all required reading. There'll be a quiz later.
That's great.
Yeah. And there's some model kits that are all destined to be slot car bodies, one way or the other. Drag cars. I do a little bit of drag racing at Batesville, although I run some vintage drag cars. I do have some of the more normal stuff, but like this would be a fairly normal contemporary drag car, model kit body.
That's cool.
With a simple wire chassis and a 3060 motor. So I've got a couple of those, but I like the more interesting things. I've got anachronisms like that. I've got a Star Wars droid riding a early 60s slot car chassis. Another early 60s dragster there. So it's a very nice, funny car.
Jungle Jim. That's
yeah.
classic.
Was always a big fan of Jungle Jim and Jungle Pam.
Yeah.
So that one is detailed up properly.
Monza, right?
Yeah, that's the Monza. He ran all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
The Monza. I've seen this car in the Garlitz Museum.
Yeah.
Down in Florida. So, and like that, it's sort of a typical contemporary drag car.
Yeah.
But I like my oldies too. This one's a bit of a anachronism in that even though the body appears all rusted out and
that's great.
And it looks like a very old car. The slot car components are all at least 4 or 5 years older than the car that it depicts.
Yeah.
So
that's a good. I love that. That's great detail work on that, Jim. Well done.
So up here, these are almost all hand-built Formula 132nd Formula cars. Many of them scratch builts. Some of them from back in the 60s. Got the midgets and sprint cars.
The midgets are great.
Now let's look at a couple of those. If you want, we can. If you were here, I'd say, well, pick out which one you want to drive, and we'll go out to the track and you can drive it. You got a favorite?
On any of those. I grew up about 15 minutes from a 3/8 mile dirt track, high bank, and it's still there today. And we go about once every couple of years and go watch the sprint cars and late models. But I remember them running midgets when I was a kid, and they still looked like that when I was little.
Yep. Yeah,
just great memories with my dad.
These are all just early 16D motored midgets.
Yeah, those are fantastic. I bet they get around the track pretty good.
Yeah, they do. They do.
Yeah.
So, here, take this one. Some of my 124 stuff over here. This is actually a car from the era that my engineering story was from. This was a Group 7 open car from 1973. These were, this was a 4-second car on a 220 foot track back then.
That's so fast.
This car was actually was one of the first races that were allowed to use the full size wings, but the chassis were still quite heavy. This is 180 grams.
Yeah.
And the car was banned. This body was banned because through reading the magazines, I think it was in Scientific Popular Mechanics, often had these articles about new technologies that were coming out, and they had a little article about this weird film. They called it a diffraction grating. You've all seen it on signs and things now.
Yeah.
But I got some samples of this stuff from the manufacturer pretty much before it was released to the public. And when I put it on this car, I painted the car and put it on the inside. As it went around the track, it changed colors. And it was, you know how this stuff does.
Right, yeah.
Anyway, they banned it as it was considered illegal because it was too distracting. So
that's funny.
Yeah. So
yeah, I guess I've never been to a big wooden track where they're running those. Well, I take that back. I've been to one, but they weren't moving that fast. But at those kind of times, the reaction that it takes, I imagine you have to kind of ease into racing a car like that.
When I bring a guest, this is another car from about the similar era with the hand painted body. This one
that's fun.
Sort of says it all. Get out of my way. Right?
That's great.
Anyway, when I have invited a guest to play with some of my toys at a commercial raceway, and I'll start them out with something mild, a couple of Flexies or Womps. Well,
yeah,
Womps are often considered a beginning car, but they handle so poorly. They're not really a great car for a beginner.
Right.
Anyway, so I give them something easy to drive and let them get oriented with the track, and then eventually I'll put a wing car on the track that's many times faster. And what I tell them is you can't be careful with this car. You have to drive this car aggressively because it's the aerodynamics. The modern wing cars are so light; it's only the aero that holds them down.
Right.
So if you go tentatively into a corner, they don't go around the corner. You have to drive them aggressively. Modern wing cars look more like this.
Oh wow!
So there's not much to the chassis, and it's all about the aerodynamics, and that's about 45 grams.
Oh wow!
Maybe less.
Light.
So, but yeah, you pretty much have to be aggressive with them, but they handle so well that they're actually pretty easy to drive. But the other thing about driving the real fast stuff like that is, like, have you ever had one of those accidents where everything seems to happen in slow motion?
Right. Yes.
You know, you actually, you know, you're headed for the tree or over the edge or whatever it was, and you actually feel like you have time to think about where you're going to hit, where you're going to land, and what you should have done last week. You
Right.
know, in that
Yeah.
in that split second, you know, when the adrenaline hits and and that happens, that's kind of the zone you get into when you're driving the really fast stuff. So you just kind of get in that headspace where everything seems to slow down, and you can make decisions about, you know, am I going to pass the guy in this turn or the next? And gosh, the last time I hit the wall, I think I damaged the body, so now it's not handling quite so well, so I have to, you know, drive differently. You got time for all that stuff, even though, you know, it's moving blindingly fast. But the problem with that mindset is that when you do come off track and the marshal reaches for your car, it feels like it takes him a week.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so these are all.
I agree. Like that happens in sports too. I played a lot of sports as a kid, and as I got older, I remember like baseball, how the game really slowed down, and like that
Right.
75, 80 mile an hour pitch. I had time to think about that and make a decision. And you know, it's
Right.
your mind working faster. It's not really the game slowing down, but in your head it is. So I could see that the
Yes.
same thing happens on the slot car. I mean, I've seen it happen here with my really fast cars on my layout. The better I get at driving, the more I have time to react. So yeah, I guess it's all relative.
Yeah. So, like I said, I kind of admire the era of racing when there was a lot of innovation in the 60s. So these are some of my favorites. This is
That's cool.
the Mickey Thompson special driven by Dave McDonald's. The story of that car. Now, of course, it ended in disaster with Dave being killed at Indy in '64. But I still find the whole backstory on those cars and Mickey Thompson to be very interesting. So I've got several scratch builds of his cars. And this is a favorite. This,
Oh, that's beautiful. That's a great color.
and again, a unique chassis. The motor all the way at the back. You can actually see the armature through the back of the car.
Yeah.
But you know, you were here, you'd be welcome to drive any of these. These are most of these cars have raced and been retired. So they're almost all in race tuned, you know, kind of optimum form.
Yeah.
And then we've got some of the more
I would imagine
ordinary
nothing
ones.
less from you, Jim, just in our conversations that you've gone through and meticulously tuned every one of those cars.
Pretty much.
They're all ready for race day.
Some of them, you know, of course, were built for one specific race, and then they're done anyway. This one was built for one of our Le Mans endurance races where we run exceptionally fast. We basically turn the power supply all the way up, so you're at 24 volts. You're allowed to have as much magnet as you care to.
Sure.
And in this case, it was run in a 1 hour nonstop race. You qualify, then you run for a full hour without stop. And so that means you really have to find the balance between speed and durability, because you know, with a ton of magnets, these motors don't generally survive running flat out like that for an hour. So that was an interesting race.
Too much heat, right?
Yeah. This one was built for a similar race. I'm not generally a fan of twin motors, but this one worked very well. Also, as a high magnet race where heat was important and durability was important. It has each motor drives a separate rear wheel for a sort of a differential effect.
Yeah.
My first Fly cars, when Fly came out with these highly detailed cars like these Lolas, that really got me back into 132. I had largely dismissed 132 when Skeletric and those guys were producing, not very detailed, very toy-like cars.
Yeah.
But Fly raised that bar and made them interesting again as actual models. Over here, there's a bunch of womps up at the top, but these I think are precious to me because these are some of the very first angle winder cars from the mid 60s, and you'll notice that they have a pod very much like contemporary cars, although they don't yet have a guide. They use a pin,
okay,
like an HO car, and so that's a state-of-the-art club car from the early 60s, mid 60s, I suppose. It's still an inline.
Now, is that
so?
Did they start with pins and then move to guides, or?
Well, early on, you saw both. The pin guide does have certain advantages. It seems to have largely disappeared now, but I have some pin guide cars that run very well. A pin guide car rarely deslots. It'll tend to, because the problem with the guide is you can get more reliable contact because the braid stays aligned to the rails,
right?
But at some point the guide stops rotating. The car hits the stop on the guide, and generally that's when it comes out. With a pin guide, the car can rotate as far as it wants to and recover. When it rotates as far as a guide would stop, it basically loses contact, so it automatically cuts the power at that point. So they're much less likely to deslot, actually. The downside, I suppose, is that they can stall at 90 degrees and get clobbered by another car. But
right.
And it's a little more fuss to, the braid adjustment becomes even more finicky. But yeah, it works. Why don't we go out to the track and
yeah, that'd be great.
Or if you guys got questions, I mean, or anybody want to see anything in particular run? I mean, I'm not going to run this dragster. This thing is
pretty wild.
Still under construction.
That's wild.
That's three 36D vintage motors with lots of gears, and it's just for fun. I have run it, and it's moderately fast. I'm still working on some of the detail bits and the body here. It will be called Locomotion. It's kind of a locomotive.
Yeah.
It runs about 1 second flat on the quarter mile.
Wow.
At Batesville, which is 55 feet, and that's an okay speed. I don't know. Okay. Might be able to do a little better than that, but it's in there. So, if there's questions or requests before we head out to the track,
yeah, I don't see any. There's a handful of questions. Most people are just super impressed with your collection. So, lots of cars, lots of eye candy for everybody.
The Chaparral here is a scratch built I did. Has a very tricky chassis. Let me see if I can show this thing a little bit. The body's off.
Nice.
When this car was entered, it was entered in a proxy event at which there would be judging, and then a race. And at the time, I used this motor, which was an industrial motor that now you see them in slot cars, like Carrera uses similar motors, these narrow motors now, but at the time they'd been used in a slot car, so that impressed the judges. And then the motor, the chassis has it's hard to show this with one hand. Let me see if I can. It has all the classic movements. It's got the bat pan movement where each of the pans tilts. It's got the plumber movement where both pans tilt from the front. It's got a trailing arm suspension where the front axle trails behind with a limiting spring. Then it's also got a center. It's hard to do with one hand, but it's got a center pivot.
Yeah.
That allows the thing to pivot. And then the pans also are spring loaded so that the supports for them in a bank turn allow it to squat. So I just had a lot of fun building the chassis and throwing all kinds of ideas at it. And then the body is set so that under cornering or braking, the rear wing comes up.
Oh, really? Oh,
you
nice.
See how the wing is active?
Yeah. That's really cool.
Yeah,
so what triggers that?
So there's there's a set of weights into the body, like set up like a pendulum.
Oh, yeah.
That actually actuate the wing. So the wing moves as it should, meaning it's flat on the straights, and under braking or cornering it comes up. So, and I had Jim Hall sign it. So that's one of my babies.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And did all of your ideas work really well on the track?
Well,
from the chassis standpoint?
It handles really well. But this was built for a proxy race that you could run any Can-Am car in. So of course, many guys would opt for something like the Porsche, which is considerably wider, has much more room for big tires, and so as did the real car. This car compromised what most everyone else was doing, which was make them bigger and wider for a little more aerodynamic sleekness, which really doesn't help you on the slot car track. So it was narrower than most, but the sophistication of the chassis did seem to make up for it, and it handled well. It qualified, I think, 5th out of 35.
Okay.
But the main problem I had with it was that the event organizer, I read the rules carefully, and the event organizer says the rules said that there would be a Concord judging that would count towards the total score, and then your qualifying counts towards your score, and then your finishing in the race counts towards your score. And then there was a series of 6 races that the cars were shipped all over the world to different tracks. Well, I knew that Jim Hall was going to be at Laguna Seca, and I wanted to show him the car. And it was the same weekend as the first race. So I asked the promoter if I could, just join in at the second race. And I had Jim sign the car. But when it got to the second event, they refused to judge it. They said, "Oh, we only did the judging at the first race."
Oh, so you missed out on points.
So yeah, so it's like, well, if you're not going to give me any points for all the effort in engineering it, I'm just not going to let you drive it around for 6 races and beat it up. So, didn't actually get to compete in the race it was built for. So, it's a nice piece, and I enjoy driving it, but just like the real one, it never won a race. So, when I showed it to Jim Hall, I told him, I said, I built this thing for this race series, and I put a lot of effort into it, and we're going to try and get the 2F a victory. I think he appreciated that, but cool. wasn't able to do it. So anyway, we should probably go. Oh, well, more favorites. So this is just, one of the boxes that I go to races with, and there's all kinds of cool stuff. This
That's sweet.
Scratch built. In this case, all with it's Paul Gage rear tires, but other than that, it's pretty much all vintage components. Pretty happy with that guy.
Yeah, that looks great.
I have a Batmobile. In this case, it's a 124 scale Batmobile on a playfit chassis.
That's great.
Runs really well too. This car, sometimes when I was racing at there was a local raceway that I used to show up at, and often, we'd have a race with some flexies, and I sometimes by the fourth or fifth heat, I'd find myself way out front, and just to make it interesting, I'd take the flexi off the track and put that Batmobile on because it's much slower, and let the guys try and catch me. But the bad news for them is I've never crashed the Batmobile. So
really, it stays in the slot, huh?
Yes, yeah.
That's fantastic.
This is a thingy, a classic Serpent, one I've had since I was 12. But it has been, although the collector purist might be horrified, it's extensively modified and much improved over the original.
Yeah. You sent me a picture of that early on via email. That's a neat car.
And a dune buggy, thoroughly detailed up.
That's great.
Dune buggy, with a couple of homies in there.
That's great. All scratch built.
Big old. Well, in this case, back in the day, you really could pick this chassis, that motor, and those components. And this one is really more an assembly job in that almost everything there was available off the shelf. There's no actual fabrication in this one, but it's completely unique in its selection and the adjustment and so forth. When it comes to hand built, we get to things like this. I really like retro racing. Now this is a hand-painted body, vacuum form body, one of the L&M 917s.
917, yeah.
And the chassis is all handmade from just wire and solder.
Yeah.
I don't know how clearly this is coming through. It doesn't look great on my camera, so I'm not sure if the details really come through. All right. So yeah, I do like the retro stuff. Some of my cars, like this one, are made by guys I raced with and admire. This is painted by Noose from Team Nutley. Nutley, New Jersey is a raceway near where I grew up that a lot of the early fast guys ran at.
Yeah.
Including Tony Fritz Blokowitz. That's his little spider logo there, and one of Tony P's chassis.
That's cool. That's a great chassis.
So, all right. So, let's go look at the track.
Head out to the track.
Yeah. So when we bought this house, it had to have a room big enough for the track. this track. I have several. I have 11 different tracks, but this is one of my favorites. It's the one that we developed the OmniSlot Box on. Since I didn't bring all 11 tracks with me, I wanted one that could run everything. So Carrera Digital, obviously.
Yeah.
This is the original installation. Well, this is the first OmniBox that was created. The original prototype is actually attached to the underside of this track, but it was proved out on this.
Yeah.
And then here's our rally track, the 1967 Rally of Monte Carlo. Fun little time trial track, one at a time. I turn the computer off, let that boot up. And I've got a little demo over here that might explain something that people have asked about on the OmniSlot Box. So we lit it up in digital format, but let's switch it to analog and connect the controller. Got a few of my favorite controllers here. See, that track's ready. I've got a Ruddock and a Professor motor and wired and wireless slottits and the wireless Franken slot.
Yeah.
So I'll take one of these, connect it. And let me see if I can put this phone in a stand so I'm not waving it all around. Let me see what we're doing. Okay. So, people have asked what the point of the meters is, and want to demonstrate that a little bit. So, okay. Can we see the meters in the car?
Yeah.
It's all right?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay, so here's a typical slotted car, and on launch, you'll be able to see the amp draw that car makes when we launch. Hardly saw anything. Let's see. Can you see it? Yeah, here we go.
Yeah.
So we get 3, maybe a half amp if we peg it with it loaded.
Right.
If we take one of the old vintage cars and try the same thing, I saw 4 amps, 6 amps.
Wow.
It was 8.
Yeah, right.
So we're seeing, okay, so that's 8 times as much current as one of these will draw. Your WAMP here, there's a 2.7. 2.7.
Yeah.
So again, on full throttle, some of these cars draw many times what your modern slotted and similar plastic chassis car draws.
Which is why you can't run those on your track normally.
Right. Yeah. Not on your tech slot and not on a normal track. So that was a big motivation for building this thing, was to allow us to run the high amperage cars like that.
Yeah.
So if you can see this clearly, this is one of the first angle winder cars built in probably 65. And notice it does have a pod, very similar to your modern 132 pin guide. Although the pin guide in this case also gives you a little bit of steering, so it has an additional complication. little vacuum formed body. This body is of a Marcos Mantis, and I remember this was when this car came out. I think it made use of aluminum honeycomb panels or something else that was very exotic at the time. And the magazines made a lot of fuss about how this was going to be such a 3.9, such a revolutionary car that was going to take over the world. As it turns out, it didn't. I think they only ever built one, but they made slot car bodies of it, and so
that's a really cool car.
Let's drive a couple. Let's see if I can set this where we can see what we're doing.
Okay. Yeah, I think I guess I didn't realize that the older motors drew that much. Is that just efficiencies in how they make the motors today compared to back then? Winding.
Yeah, I think so. I think some of it's efficiency and some of it is. I mean, the motors some of the old motors are just more heavy duty. They just the size of the brushes, the windings and so forth are just more robust. I mean, some of the Pittman motor cars I have, those motors are going to run for centuries.
Right.
They're just tough. So,
Sure.
But I think a lot of it, of course, has to do with the efficiency of the modern motors and the magnets, particularly the better magnet technology. So we're 14.5 volts with the car set up like your Alpha Dog. Your Alpha slot up here, very nice running car. No magnets, a little weight up front, silicone tires, and like most well-tuned cars of this type, it can run right about 5 seconds. What do we got? We got a 4.97. Okay, 4.97. That's a good respectable time for a car like that.
And you said that was no magnet.
Yeah, that's no magnet.
Okay.
And just a little bit of weight on the nose and silicone tires.
Okay. So
which I believe is how you like yours.
Yep.
Let's try a Womp, the traditional beginner's car for the commercial tracks. Again, no magnet. Big motor. Lots of slide. You can't get it off if you're paying attention. And a little better time, we're 4.85.
Okay.
Comparable. Yeah. But the difference being, of course, that I like to say that these cars are immortal, meaning there's not a part on that car that you can't replace. There's a zillion bodies available, wheels, tires, gears, guide, everything is available and replaceable. And you might bend one up a little bit, but as long as you know how to tweak them with a set of pliers, they're pretty much indestructible.
Yeah.
So they're fun. 124 scale flexi, the popular commercial track cars. He's not happy. There he goes. Nope, not happy. Okay. 4.3, but I think we've got an issue with this one. Anyway, 124 scale, traditional kind of stuff you'd see on commercial raceways. That vintage car, MRC with the big tubular motor.
Yeah.
Fun to drive. Yeah, I'll learn to drive it. And then a favorite around here, these 1/32 scale JK cars. Got another one over here somewhere. Not sure where they went. Anyway, these, of course, come with all kinds of bodies. Some of them are quite a bit more scale looking than this. You can get them with LMP bodies that actually look like the real car to some degree. But it's a $75 car, and they are great fun.
Nice.
$3.7.
Yeah, that's
so
nice. Yeah, that's fast
so,
car.
So, and they're fast, but they're easy to drive and easy to maintain. You don't have to worry about knocking mirrors off of them, damaging them. They're easy that way. As the 1/24 scale equivalent. This one could probably use some tire cleaning, but not bad. So I like all of it.
Yeah, that's fantastic. There's some questions in the chat about your pit lane. You have
yes.
From a digital standpoint. Do you run a lot of digital? I guess do you?
Yes.
Do you?
Yes.
Yeah.
When we have we do an open house race at least once a month, and a club race at least once a month. I'm going to throw the switch back to digital.
Okay.
So that's the switch. Like I say, it's underneath this track. So for the pit lane, I like to use a narrow section, not a normal pit entry, so that you don't have to slow down so much for the pit entry that you either crash going in or get rear-ended trying to slow down enough to get in it.
Sure.
So that helps a lot with reducing crashing. I see a lot of tracks designed with a pit lane with that sharp entry and exit in the middle of a straight, and that's just carnage waiting to happen. So in this case, the pit entry is here. I don't know if you can see me. And then it goes under and comes out up over there. So digital now. And back in the pits.
Nice.
So this is a set of 6 house cars. We keep 6 ramjet controllers. I do have the Carrera wireless, but hardly ever use those.
I think people like the ramjet or the true speed.
Sure.
That trigger. Yeah, that's nice. Yeah, it's a very creative layout. One of the questions I have, and there's a couple other questions in the chat, but one of the questions I had was, did you have to? You have a lot of elevation changes.
Yes.
And did you have to like warm the track and bend it, or was it were you just able to build a table and it formed to your layout, or did you have to?
Right. Well, I don't like a flat track. To me, if you build a flat table and lay the track on it, it just doesn't appeal to me.
Yeah.
Maybe having raced on a lot of wood tracks and commercial tracks where there is a lot of elevation change and banking, I just find that more interesting. Also, you'll notice that almost all of the turns are compound radius. I don't use the same radius all the way around. But because the track was designed with heavy use in mind, there is a plywood underlaying all of the elevated sections, and then the track is screwed down. Let me grab this so we can get a close-up look of something.
Okay.
So to get this subtle banking, what I've done is I put a wooden plug in where you can see here.
Yeah.
Rather than using the little tab that Carrera uses that plugs in, I make wooden plugs that go in that space, and then I countersink and screw the track down on its both sides all the way around. And you can see right here, there's a little bit of a gap because of the forced banking. So this is a flat section which has been forced into a slight bank, and sometimes when you do that, you'll get a little bit of a gap.
Right.
But with Carrera, there's plenty of connection, and those gaps don't really mean anything. I think the worst one I have is over here in the pit lane. There's a fairly significant gap there, but it really makes no difference electrically.
Impact, yeah.
And I just recently put a little bit of epoxy in the slot in a couple of places where there's gaps, and that's really only important for some of the pin guide cars. Get a little upset by the gaps.
By the gap, yeah.
But the normal guides don't care. So you can see over here, this is banked a bit, and it's simply screwed down in both cases. So there's no heating or anything.
Okay.
The track is just pinned down well to a substrate. Now, actually, the elevated section, you can see here the plywood that underlays the track.
Right.
But where there's significant banking, there are, I don't think you can see them anywhere, but maybe there are wedge-shaped bits of wood that are standing on it, sort of pie-shaped, slight bits that support the track so that it can be screwed down solidly on both edges.
Yeah, that's great. It definitely feels like a wood track.
Yeah.
And that's what I liked about it. Yeah. I found, before I even built my own layout, I found one of your videos, and I really loved how you built this. That was kind of one of the things I was kind of going for, was a plastic track that flows like a wood track.
Right.
And you kind of nailed it. And then the pit entry and exit is so creative. It just looks fantastic. So.
Yeah, well, like I say, the main point of it is to avoid a scenario where you're coming back on from the pit lane at the fastest point on the track. So this is one of the slowest points on the track because this turn is actually off camber. And also, anyway, we just hardly ever have any collisions at the pit entry or exit doing it this way.
Yeah, that works really well. One of the questions in the chat, let me go back to it. I just had it up. Are you when you changed from 1/32 to 1/24 scale, were you changing the voltage on the track, or are you just throwing the cars on there?
No, we've been running at 14.5 the whole time.
14.5, okay.
Yeah, 14.5 is the standard Carrera voltage. Okay. So I didn't change it. OmniSlot Box doesn't change it. You would have to do that from the power supply.
Right.
But we typically run 16 at the meters on our club racing. If it were 124, if you're running stock 124 cars, of course, you'd certainly go to 18,
right.
Or maybe push it a little bit to 19 because it's less at the rails than it is at the meter.
Yeah, right.
Slightly.
Yeah, and especially if you throw in 6 cars on top of it.
Well, this track has 9 power taps.
Nice.
It's all wired with 14 gauge. It has 2 20 amp power supplies. So it will, you don't notice a power loss with the multiple cars.
Yeah, very nice track. Is that
And
is that your favorite layout, or is this the?
well, yeah, this is. Uh, I mean, I have other tracks I like a lot, but not anything that would fit in this space that I would like better. One of the other nice things about this track is that you absolutely can, if you have 8 people present, 6 can drive, and with 2 marshals, you got it covered.
Yeah.
It's just designed to be easy to marshal. You need someone at this end because of this turn under the bridge is tricky, and then with someone in the middle, you got it.
Yeah.
You know,
That's great.
and then the race control can be managed from the tablet here, and then it shows up on the monitor behind you.
Very nice.
So we're running Smart Race here, and TrackMate for analog.
Yeah.
Then, of course, my other favorite track. I think this is my favorite scenic track.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
It's a lot of fun, and you know, it's funny. Good lap times on this track are about 5 seconds, as you've seen. This track, being much smaller, it actually measures 3 by 7. Good lap times are about 12 seconds. So because there are 9 turns up the hill and 9 turns back down.
Yeah.
And it will teach you to drive in a hurry. It's run as a time trial. We set the timing software to give everyone 10 laps, and best time for the 10 laps, wins. Yeah. So it's based on the total time.
Yeah, that's great.
There's a set of cars in the case on the end here, which are all tuned for this track. Of course, this is inspired by the 1967 Rally of Monte Carlo, which was famous in part because it snowed halfway up the mountain. And so it was a challenging event. And I like to ask people which car they thought won the race. Of course, the Citroen with the event logo on the hood and the snow all over it would be a good guess, but no, they didn't win. And of course, you got the Ferrari GTOs that were there, but as much money as they cost now, they didn't win. And some people get bold.
Weren't there, so
the Subarus were definitely too new. Yeah. As were the Lancias and the Renaults. They competed in later versions. The Jags, C-Jag. I don't think the C-Jag would have run in that. That's a Le Mans car.
Yeah.
We've got various Fiats and Triumphs and Austin Healey's, and of course the Porsches. Lots of Porsches. The Audi Quattro. That's a fly Audi Quattro. Great little car, all-wheel drive. One of my favorite fly cars. I like fly cars because they're different motor configurations and full depth interiors and all that, and they usually require a little tuning, which is part of the fun. The Duchevaux. This is an all-wheel drive Duchevaux from I think it's MRC or Scale Auto, someone. Anyway, anyone care to guess which car won this race?
Anybody have guesses in the chat? Which one won the race? There's a lot of great looking cars in that case.
It's not the Reliant Robin. No, definitely not.
Somebody said the Mini Cooper.
Yes, the Mini Cooper, of course. Yes, first victory for a Mini Cooper, driven by Paddy Hopkirk, number 177. Seen that car in the museum, the same museum that the Slot Car Festival is held at in Gaydon, England. Nice. That museum has this particular car there. And let's try him out on this track. Let's see. I've got this. Go. All right. I'll start down here. There's one lap. Oop, can't drive and wave the camera at the same time.
Yeah, that's a little tough.
Yeah, I don't know if the. Let me see. Let me see what I'm doing here. Maybe not. If I put the camera in stand, I guess you can tell, but I can't watch the camera in the car at the same time.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
Anyway, so, it's a fun track.
How long ago did you build that track, and how long did it take you?
Well, this track was originally built by Bill Schneiderwind, out of Los Angeles. Bill Schneiderwind is a professor of ancient Near Middle Eastern languages. And he's built a series of beautiful scenic tracks like this. And he just builds them for himself. But typically when he gets one done, he starts thinking about the next one. And so I think I've bought and sold, I don't know, 3 or 4, at least 3 of his tracks, and found them new homes. But this one, I'm trying to put this thing in the stand. This track is just too much fun for me to not keep it. So,
yeah, he did an amazing job. The scenery is amazing.
Well, I did tune it up quite a bit, both electrically and I added all the figures and a few other things. So, but the basic scenery, the basic track is his work. There we go. So this is part of the fun of this, is you really do have to get the car loose and throw it around the corners to make the corners.
Yeah.
And of course, if the track's dusty and loose, well, that's why it's a rally track.
Yeah, it's all part of it.
And kind of like the model train layout that I built with the family when I was a kid. There's little stories about all these different figures. There's various little things going on with them. I bought a collection of a guy who had all of the homie figures, all 900 of them or whatever there are. There's a bunch of them. And I went through the homies and pulled out every one that I thought could have been there in '67. So they make up the bulk of the population here, and they had a lot of character. There's some monogram figures and some Carrera figures and a few others, but it is principally homies.
Yeah.
And
it looks fantastic. That's great. A lot of work goes into a track like that.
Yeah. And so this is magnetic braid. So you can run magnet cars on it, although mostly it's more fun with less magnets. Magnet cars are pretty damn fast on this thing and a little intense. But with no magnets, it's good fun.
Yeah, definitely.
So, if anybody wants to see anything else, here I am.
Yeah, I don't. Well,
and please, if you get to Arkansas, do come visit. Oh, here's something that's fun. I like to have art with the matching slot car. So I've got these prints of some very nice paintings. These are all paintings of instances where the car got airborne and got the matching car. And some of the old vintage stuff with the packaging art, the real car. And I have a couple of the tether cars.
That's all That's all really cool stuff. The posters are fantastic.
Yeah, I like to connect the slot car to the real thing.
Oh yeah, that's nice. I like the Lamont art.
Yeah. These are all by Roger Warwick. Does some really nice stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, my
right.
plan is to have a couple of those on the wall here on my track. So as I continue to decorate a little bit.
Yeah, I've got some space to go with some decorating. I want to do more with scenery on the track as well. Like this track, like most of my tracks, is a portable track. It actually splits into thirds, and then it's got wheels that attach so that it can roll out on edge and roll into a trailer and set up quickly for an event. So any scenery or anything like that that's on it has to be durable.
Yeah.
The greenscape is actually all carpeting that I've just rattle canned some color on. It's brown carpeting with green spray paint, and I like that because it doesn't. If cars roll off onto it, they don't pick up grass and so forth very much. I mean, I've got some lichen laying around on it right now, but it's it's pretty durable and very durable, and doesn't tend to leave junk on the cars either. There's a mirror came off of that Alpha, I think, and of course that goes where all the other stuff goes in the dumpster. Nice. I have that for. I tell people, if you lose mirrors or whatever, just check the dumpster. Yeah, it'll be in there eventually. Yeah.
That's great.
So,
well, there's lots of people who have really enjoyed this this live stream. Lots of great comments. I don't know if anybody in the chat has questions about the OmniSlot Box. I mean, I think that we've talked a lot about that on my channel, and we've probably taken most of the questions and figured them out. But yeah, I think that Jim, your layout there with you call that Nomad Raceway?
Well, Nomad Raceways is my company,
company. Okay.
and it's Nomad because we're a mobile event company. Okay. I call this track Grand Prix. I probably need a more creative name for it. Our club is Central Arkansas Slot Racers. We're on Facebook, and you can see some of our racing there. Like I say, I encourage visitors, if you get out this way, if you're flying over, bring your parachute. We're in the middle of everything and nowhere. But
yeah, I think you've got a few people. You've got a few people in the chat that want to come visit you. You've got Boone.
Oh, good.
Boone said he's only a state away. He didn't realize he was that close to you. And then Danny Wiley.
Yeah, I love. Maybe Boone can give me some more inspiration on the
scenery,
scenic aspect. He's done some wonderful work. I've been watching that. I'm really not quite sure what I want to do about some of because of the large overpass area and so forth. It's kind of I'm not real sure what I want to do. Come visit.
Yeah, and then Steve Sweeney says, please thank Jim for hooking me up with a new hot rod. So you must have. Yeah,
well, I do a lot of eBay sales, mostly vintage slot cars, but not exclusively. I do sell some Carrera and Electric and other things, but so I think Steve probably bought something there, or there is a small store connected to the Nomad Raceways site. The Nomad Raceway site is mostly about our mobile events, but it does have a section of blogs, some things that I've written. I'm kind of proud of some of those blogs. I don't know if anybody ever read them, but they're there. and there's a store with some inventory on it. I gave up on having a full on retail store back in 2010 to 2014. I had a full store comparable to Professor Motor or Electric Dreams.
Yeah.
I had a lot of inventory and all that, but boy, hats off to those guys, because it is so hard to sell slot car hard goods. Yeah, it just is.
Yeah, it
so
sure is. Yeah, it's a tough business to be in, I think. Everybody wants the prices
yeah. You see,
low.
I had at the same time I had my bicycle restoration business, and I bought replacement parts and so forth from bicycle distributors. We did some modern bicycle work, but mostly restoration. But I was quite familiar with the bicycle industry, and the difference between the way the distributors work in the bicycle industry and the way it works in the slot car industry is quite remarkable. The major the major slot car manufacturers like Skeletric and Carrera are distributed through one company-owned source. In the bicycle industry, Shimano, sells to everybody. Crampinolo sells for everybody. As a retailer, I always had a choice of 4 or 5 different distributors that I could get replacement parts from. Now, if I was a Trek dealer, I had to buy through Trek, but even there, it wasn't kind of a sole source situation. And so the distributors seem to have motivation to compete for your business, and so they would have things like an ordering system that integrated with your point of sale. They'd have sales reps that would show up and actually help you with display and inventory selection. And there was hardly ever a time when I needed something that wasn't available. The slot car industry, I don't want to dump on anybody in particular, but there were times when I'd have a guy order a big custom track, and the sole supplier had no straights for like 3,
Right.
well, I think it was 8 weeks at one point. It's like, I know they have them up in Canada, and I know that they have them in Europe, and how can you be out of a staple like straights,
Yeah.
standard straights, for 8 weeks? Like, that's not a problem. What am I going to tell this guy? He wants to order $3,000 worth of track, and I got to tell him he's got to wait 8 weeks because I can't get the straights.
Right.
Stuff like that. It's very, very hard to deal with, yeah.
Yeah, I think distribution is probably a problem that they struggle with and don't have great answers for. So,
well, it's a smaller industry, and there's fiscal restrictions. I'm not saying that anyone's a villain, but I do. Although, and let me get on my soapbox here. Something that in the bicycle industry, of course, we were in the high end of things. People that brought in a bike for refinishing and restoration often spent $1,500, sometimes $2,000 having a bike refinished. So, it was a high end, but I always felt like the big box stores and the suppliers that sold to them did the industry a big disservice, in that the big box stores dictate a price. In the bicycle industry, it was like they had to have a bike at a $49 price point, a $69 price point, and an $89 price point. So if you wanted to sell to them, you had to build bikes to that price point. And they were junk. Most of the bikes that you could buy in department stores and all that at those price points were were really uncomfortable and performed poorly. So in my mind, on one hand, it makes sense for the consumer. Well, I think I'd like to get into cycling, and I've been to that bike shop, and they want to sell me a $300 bike, but maybe I should try it out on this bike I can get for $79. Of course, he's not going to like it.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
It performs so badly that it turns him off on cycling. And I see the same thing in the slot car thing. I mean, I travel extensively. I meet thousands of people every year and reintroduce them or introduce them to slot car racing. And one of the stories I hear all the time is, "Oh yeah, we had those, but they just flew off the track. I could never keep them on track, or it broke right away."
Right.
And a lot of the low cost sets are really hard to drive. I've got club racers that know their stuff that can barely get around some of the low cost sets.
Right.
Well, that to me, that turns people off on the hobby. They're like, "Oh yeah, tried that, been there, done that. I'm no good at it, or it just sucks." So
yeah,
it's just another thing.
Yeah, I run into that.
It's just another thing that's hard to overcome.
I play guitar and sing, and people come to me for advice when they want to buy their son or daughter a guitar.
Mm-hmm.
And I always tell them, buy the most expensive guitar you can afford, because the experience of learning to play guitar on a $50 guitar or a $100 guitar versus a $500 guitar is gigantic. Now, from 500 to 800, the difference isn't as much.
Yeah, it falls off. Right, exactly.
1,500, and bicycles are the same way, I think.
Exactly.
But slot cars are the same way. And so some people have a bad experience because they didn't spend a little bit more money up front, and they just had a bad experience because of that. So yeah, that you make a great point, Jim. That's fantastic.
And me, go ahead.
No, I was done. Go ahead.
Yeah, and meanwhile, of course, some of those big suppliers have also moved away from supporting the hobby shops that can actually guide people and give them a little bit of good advice and a little bit of help. If you buy something from Walmart, the good news is that you can always take it back and they don't ask any questions at all. And that's one of the reasons why you don't see slot cars in places like Walmart, is that the slot car suppliers get killed because people take them home and they don't figure out that you have to adjust the brushes.
Right.
The brushes are laying flat, they don't get good contact, or they have some other very small problem, and they just take it back. And there's certainly no one in a Kmart or Walmart situation that's going to explain to them what they did wrong.
That's right.
So and if you sell to a big box like that and they accept it back, you don't get paid for it.
That's right.
That comes right back out of the manufacturer's pocket. Walmart doesn't take the hit on that. They just credit it back. Just return it. So
and their return policy is so easy. People buy stuff just to play with for the weekend and then take it back on Monday because their return policy is so easy. So that makes it frustrating for the low end of the hobby, and a lot of people miss out on. I mean, my first track was a TCR track, which is the slotless, right, from the
total
80s.
Control racing.
Yeah. And my brother and I, Dusty is in the chat, we wore that track out. And now there were times where the track would get put away for months, and then it always came back out during the holidays, or we'd have a rain day where we were trapped at the house, and we would set the track up and run the cars. But I got out of that, kind of outgrew that track, and didn't get to experience. I didn't have a local slot car club, or didn't have anything like it until this last year, and so I missed out on. I'm realizing I missed out on years and years of fun at 1/32, 1/24 scale, scratch building, all these things that if I would have had a hobby shop close that I could have been introduced to that type of slot car racing, I would have stuck with it a long time.
I had a similar experience in that when I had my HO set at home. Oh, I got to show you something about that. When I had my HO set in the basement at home in New Jersey, and wanted to go to race on the big commercial tracks, I remember one Christmas, one of my best friends at school said, "Oh, I got a slot car track for Christmas, and it's bigger than yours." And so that was cool. And we went over there, and he had a 1/32 scale set. And I don't know if it was Skelectric or Eldon or what it was, but when I had already started to tune my 130 my HO cars and 124 scale cars, and when I looked at the 132 stuff that he had, it occurred to me, oh, this is a toy, and it just had no appeal to me. I can show you. Here's a good example. It probably was a car like this. Let me turn this camera around again. Okay. So this is a UOP Shadow with a snap-in motor and guide. And the detail is just not there.
Right.
And the motor just, snaps in. So there's no chassis that you can do anything with. You can't really tune it to any degree. In this case, I put some better tires on it. I suppose you might be able to add some weight, but that just sort of turned me off on 132nd. So I focused on HO and 124 until Fly came out with cars like this.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
That's, it's got steering, it's got suspension, it's detailed on the underside. They're awesome.
Yeah, that's a great.
So that sort of thing is what got me back into 132, which I admit I largely ignored, with the exception of some of the cool monogram stuff and the scratch build stuff. The production stuff for a long time had no appeal to me because of the lack of detail.
Yeah,
but that's been addressed now.
It sure has. I mean, even like Carrera cars, the detail in the base level Carrera cars are fantastic, I think.
Oh yeah. You see, I've got a Corvette and
the C8
and
yes.
Miles Ford GT. Now, of course, Ken Miles Ford GT had to have that.
Yeah, of course.
And then, but I've got
Slotted's getting ready to release one of those too.
Yeah, I've got. Here's a Ken Miles car as well. This one is a Tamiya model kit.
Yeah, that's
so
nice.
The detail is quite good.
Yeah,
124
nice.
Scale on a playfit chassis.
Okay.
And lovely car.
That is lovely.
Then, of course, if you've I've got my Ferraris, 124 Ferraris, and then here's the.
Oh yeah.
Now this is a vacuum form car.
Okay.
But being as it is, Ford of course had the big scary motor. So keeping up with that, this has the big Chemtron motor.
Nice.
And so that's a period 60s car with an appropriate motor in it. I use magnets to keep the wheels off the surface.
So they don't flat spot and last longer.
Right. Now this is actually my second. This is the car that my dad had to buy me after my first win, which is a BZ 4GT.
Oh yeah.
And I drove this a lot, but took care of it.
Yeah, it looks brand new.
I think that actually is. I think I did replace the body, but I made sure it's exactly the same color, number, everything as my original.
Yeah, that's great.
But I really enjoy the variety in the old cars. You know, the different technologies used in the chassis and so forth, from the Cox magnesium stuff.
Yeah. It's fun to look at all the technology changes that's happened even in slot cars over the years.
Oh yeah, yeah. Yeah, to me that adds a whole lot of interest to the whole thing. Oh, we were going to run midgets, but I don't know how long you want to go on and on. So,
well, we're bumping up against 2 hours, so I
okay.
want to be conscious of your time as well.
Oh, I'll go on forever, man. I love this stuff. So you know, I could go for 4 hours if you want. If you do visit, man, you better pack a lunch, because
All right.
I'll keep you here all day, and the next not. I'll put you. I'll pick you up at the airport. I'll put you up if you can stand to sleep with the cats. Then come and have some fun. I mean, that's the one thing about being in Arkansas is there just aren't quite as many people to play with. So I'm always up for a visit.
Well, we'll have to make that happen. I appreciate that. Thanks for the invite. But yeah, based on the chat, Jim, I think you have some people that'll reach out to you that are pretty close to you. So maybe you'll get some visitors soon.
God, look at the dates on some of those trophies. It makes me feel so old. 1965. Oh, this one's from 2018. That's better.
There you go.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Looks like you've had a successful racing career.
Well, yeah, you know, I had to for a long time. It was like I wouldn't allow myself to buy another car until I won a race. So look out.
That's one way to force yourself to get better at driving, right?
Yeah, this one is a replica of the actual drag car that my dad ran.
Oh, nice.
In the 60s. Cool. Oh, it's getting a little dusty. But I replicated the decals and everything the way he had it back then. This car was a killer. It was the Plymouth Lancer. They had apparently the real car had the slant 6 aluminum block slant 6, and the story goes that they had Chrysler had made about 200 of those to homologate them for some race in Spain. So there were very few of them in the country, in the U.S., with the aluminum slant 6. And he, I think he went, what was it, 67 out of 69. He was 67 and 2 with this thing. Wow. Went all the way to the nationals. The family went out to Indianapolis for him to run in the nationals, and he was protested almost every time he ran it, because they couldn't believe that this little six-cylinder car was beating all the 8s that were in all the Chevy small blocks and so forth that were in the same class. And they made him pull the cam out of it almost every time. So he gets all the way to the nationals, having been protested dozens of times, never got busted for anything. He gets literally to the line at the nationals when Wally Parks himself tells him that they're going to reclassify his car from, I think it was D stock to B stock or something, move him up several classes, because they just, you know, it was making too much horsepower, basically, is what he said. So,
and they didn't like that it was beating the Chevy V8s.
Well, yeah, it was, it was a unpopular economy car, and it was beating the Fords and Chevys and embarrassing them. So they decided to reclassify it. But it was exceptionally light for their era. And the 6s have a lot of torque, so it's a good car. So anyway, I built that for Dad.
Yeah, that's great. That's fantastic.
So yeah, most of the cars have a story. So if you were here, we'd keep you a long time to explain them all.
Well, we'll try to get out to Arkansas, and we can spend a day doing that. I look forward to
Cool.
that.
Yeah, we're just 15 minutes from the airport near Little Rock, so it's
Okay.
actually pretty easy.
Fantastic. Well, you're getting lots of compliments on your collection in the chat, but no questions. So you must have done a great job explaining things.
Yeah, when you talk too much, sometimes you answer all the questions up front. All right. Well,
All right.
thanks for having me on. That was fun.
Well, Jim, I appreciate it. Thanks for coming on. It means a lot. You'd spend some time to talk us through your collection and your journey in slot cars, and obviously, based on the conversation in the chat, after this post, you might want to go back and read the live chat because you missed out on a lot of compliments, and really, you have a lot of respect from everyone in the chat. Just lots of things, nice, kind words. So yeah, I would encourage you to go back and read through those.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I often don't catch you live, so I often do look at the chat and.
Yeah, it takes a little while. Yeah, it takes a little while for the live chat to post. It's usually 6 or 8 hours later, so before the live chat comes live on the video. But Jim, man, thanks. This has been fantastic. I really appreciate your time. This has been a wonderful tour of your place. I would love to get some laps in on your layout. So I'll bring some of my cars, and then you can tell me, you can help me with tuning them up for your track. So
yeah, bring some toys.
Yeah, that sounds great. Well, guys, we're going to close up. Thanks again, Jim. Thanks for everybody that tuned in. Oh, you got something else?
I was just going to say, I'll let you run that 50-year-old Mantis. You'll find that it's a lot quicker than your Alpha.
I have a feeling it is. I believe that. Before we go, Jim, how can people find you? Website?
Well, website would be nomadraceways.com. Central Arkansas Slot Racers on Facebook. OmniSlotBox.com. And my direct email is jim@nomadraceways.com.
Okay. What's your eBay channel name?
eBay channel name, Nomad2Race on eBay.
Race. Okay. Yeah, Daryl Rogers.
Yeah, and I have a store.
Okay.
Yeah, I have a store.
All right. Well, the guys will find you out there. Well, Jim, thanks. I appreciate it. Thanks for your time. And guys, thanks for tuning in, and go have some fun racing.
Yes.